Colleen Burns. On July 18, 2016, 35-year-old Colleen Burns and her friends started their hike at 11:30 that morning from the South Rim trailhead. The group descended the South Kaibab Trail, stopping frequently to take photos and admire the views. Temperatures hovered around 85 degrees at the rim but would climb past 100 degrees at the canyon floor. By 1:30, they reached Ooh Ah Point, a popular photography spot about 3/4 of a mile down the trail. The overlook extends out from the main trail, offering unobstructed views in 3 directions. There are no fences, no warning signs, just red dirt and a straight drop to the rocks below. Colleen walked to within 6 feet of the edge. Her friend stayed back, taking photos of her against the canyon backdrop. She turned around and held up her phone for a selfie. She took one photo, checked it, then decided she wanted more of the canyon visible behind her. She took 2 steps backward. The ground felt solid. She took a 3rd step. Her left foot landed on the edge where centuries of erosion had weakened the rock. The limestone crumbled under her weight. She fell backward, arms flailing, phone still in her hand. The fall took approximately 4 seconds. She struck an outcropping 60 feet down, which broke her back and knocked her unconscious. Then she tumbled another 340 feet, hitting rock faces multiple times before coming to rest on a steep slope. Her friend screamed and called 911 at 2:03. Park rangers arrived within 12 minutes but had to wait for a technical rescue team. The slope was too steep for a standard recovery. A helicopter was dispatched at 2:47 but couldn't land due to the terrain. Rangers rappelled down to reach her body at 3:35. She had been dead since impact. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death as massive blunt force trauma with skull fractures and internal bleeding. Toxicology was negative. No drugs, no alcohol, just a tragic mistake. Her case drew international attention. News outlets from The Guardian to NBC covered the story. Park officials used her death in safety campaigns, warning visitors that no photo is worth your life. Marguerite Williams, June 27, 2019, brought record-breaking heat to northern Arizona. Temperatures at the Grand Canyon rim reached 107 degrees by noon. Down at the canyon floor, thermometers would hit 113 degrees, hot enough to cause severe burns from touching sun-exposed rock. The National Weather Service issued an excessive heat warning, and park rangers posted emergency alerts at every trailhead. The message was clear: do not hike into the canyon today. Marguerite Williams, a 62-year-old from Florida, started down Hermit Trail anyway at 6:30 that morning. She was an experienced hiker who had completed difficult trails across the country. She carried 2 liters of water for what she planned as a 4-hour out-and-back hike to Santa Maria Spring, about 4.8 miles round trip with 1,160 feet of elevation change. The temperature at the trailhead was already 82 degrees when she signed the trail register. Another hiker tried to warn her about the forecast. She thanked him but continued on. She felt prepared. The Hermit Trail descends steeply through exposed rock with almost no shade. For the first hour, Marguerite made good progress. She reached the Waldron Trail junction at 7:45 and kept going. The temperature had climbed to 94 degrees. She drank from her first water bottle. By 8:30, she was a mile and a half into the canyon. The sun beat down on the red rocks, creating a furnace effect. Heat radiated from every surface. The air temperature read 101 degrees, but the ground temperature exceeded 130 degrees. She finished her first liter of water. At 9:15, roughly 2 miles in and 1,400 feet below the rim, another hiker coming up the trail noticed her sitting on a rock. Her face was flushed deep red. Sweat soaked her shirt, but her skin looked dry. Classic signs of heat exhaustion progressing toward heat stroke. The hiker offered her water. She took a few sips and said she planned to turn back shortly. That was the last conversation anyone had with her. By 10:30, with the temperature at 108 degrees, Marguerite tried to stand up and collapsed. Her core body temperature had exceeded 104 degrees. At this point, the body's cooling system fails completely. Blood pressure drops, the heart races trying to pump blood to vital organs, the brain swells, and organs begin shutting down. She lost consciousness, sprawled across the trail in full sun. 2 hikers found her at 11:05. They immediately called for emergency services and tried to cool her by pouring their water over her head and body. They dragged her into the shade of a small overhang. Park rangers were notified at 11:12. A helicopter was dispatched within 8 minutes but had to wait for clearance due to tour flights in the area. The helicopter reached her location at 12:03, nearly an hour after she was found. Flight medics attempted to revive her with cooling packs and IV fluids. Her body temperature measured 107.4 degrees. They loaded her into the helicopter at 12:27 and flew directly to Flagstaff Medical Center. Doctors worked to lower her core temperature using ice baths and cold IV infusions. Despite aggressive treatment, Marguerite never regained consciousness. She was pronounced dead at 4:17 that afternoon from hyperthermia with multi-organ failure. The autopsy revealed that her kidneys had shut down completely. Her liver showed signs of acute failure and brain swelling was severe. The medical examiner noted that she had been dehydrated before she even started showing symptoms. By the time she felt thirsty, the damage was already done. Heat stroke kills by basically cooking your organs from the inside. The Park Service now recommends 1 liter of water per hour of hiking in summer, plus electrolyte replacement. They actively turn back hikers who appear underprepared, and they close inner canyon trails when temperatures exceed 110 degrees. But people still ignore the warnings. They see the beautiful views and forget they're entering an environment that can kill them in hours. The plane tragedy. June 18, 1986 was a busy day for sightseeing flights over the Grand Canyon. Dozens of small planes and helicopters carried tourists through the canyon airspace, a loosely regulated zone where pilots navigated by sight rather than air traffic control. At 9:14 in the morning, a Grand Canyon Airlines Twin Otter departed from Grand Canyon Airport with 19 passengers and a crew of 2. The plane was making a standard scenic loop through the Atos Canyon. At the same time, a Piper Archer PA-28 with 2 passengers and a pilot took off from Las Vegas for a private sightseeing flight. Both aircraft were flying under visual flight rules in uncontrolled airspace. No radio contact with ground control was required. Pilots were responsible for seeing and avoiding other aircraft. At 9:34, passengers in the Twin Otter were looking out their windows at the canyon walls. Nobody was watching the sky ahead. The pilots were focused on the scenery below, pointing out landmarks to passengers over the intercom. The Piper Archer approached from the opposite direction at nearly the same altitude. Neither pilot saw the other aircraft until it was too late. The Piper's propeller struck the Twin Otter's tail section at a combined closing speed of 250 miles per hour. The impact was catastrophic. The Twin Otter's tail separated completely, severing control cables and hydraulics. The plane pitched violently forward and entered an uncontrolled dive. Passengers were thrown against seatbelts in overhead compartments. Screaming filled the cabin for 28 seconds as the aircraft fell 3,500 feet. It struck the canyon wall just above the Tonto Trail at 9:35, exploding on impact. All 21 people aboard died instantly. The Piper Archer's left wing sheared off from the collision. The plane spun into a flat spin and crashed 600 feet from the Twin Otter. All 3 people aboard were killed. The debris field stretched over 300 yards across the rocky slope. Hikers on the Tonto Trail saw both planes fall and immediately reported the crashes. The first rangers arrived by helicopter at 10:47. They found wreckage scattered across an area accessible only by air or by difficult hiking. Body recovery took 3 days. The National Transportation Safety Board launched an investigation that lasted 8 months. Their findings were damning. The uncontrolled airspace over the Grand Canyon had become a hazard. Too many flights, no coordination, pilots relying on luck to avoid collisions. 17 safety recommendations were issued, and Congress passed legislation establishing altitude restrictions and defined flight corridors. The changes worked. There has not been a mid-air collision over the Grand Canyon since 1986. But the accident remains the deadliest aviation disaster in Grand Canyon history. It killed 25 people in seconds because of a system that prioritized scenic flights over safety. The crash site is still visible from the Tonto Trail, metal fragments and scorched rock mark where 25 people fell from the sky. The couple's fall March 23, 2014, started as a perfect spring day at Lipan Point, an overlook on the canyon's east rim. Temperatures hovered around 70 degrees. Hundreds of tourists crowded the viewpoint, taking photos and enjoying the views. At 2:15 in the afternoon, a couple in their mid-30s from California asked another tourist to take their photo. They walked to within 10 feet of the edge, where the ground slopes gently toward a 450-foot cliff. They stood close together, smiling at the camera. The photographer framed the shot with the canyon behind them. He snapped 3 photos. The couple asked to review them and walked closer to the edge to see the camera screen. They stood side by side looking down at the images. One of them pointed at something in the photo and stepped forward. The ground gave way, not just under one person, but under both of them. A section of rim roughly 8 feet wide collapsed all at once, the result of erosion that had hollowed out the rock from beneath. Both people fell together, dropping straight down for the first 80 feet before hitting a steep slope. They tumbled and slid another 370 feet, their bodies striking rocks and outcroppings the entire way. Multiple witnesses saw the fall and called 911 at 2:19. The couple who had taken their photo was in shock, unable to speak coherently. Other tourists backed away from the edge, suddenly aware of how unstable the ground was. Park rangers arrived at 2:33 and immediately called for a technical rescue team. Rappelling operations began at 3:15. Rangers reached the first body at 3:47 and the second at 4:02. Both victims were deceased, killed by massive trauma on impact with the slope. Recovery took until 6:30 due to the difficult terrain and the need to document the scene. The medical examiner later confirmed that death had been instantaneous for both individuals. Toxicology showed no impairment. This was purely an accident caused by unstable ground. Park officials investigated the collapse and found that water erosion had undermined the rim's foundation over decades. What looked solid was actually a thin shell of rock over empty space. They closed that section of Lipan Point and installed barriers 15 feet back from the edge. Engineers surveyed other popular overlooks and found similar erosion issues at 17 different locations. Over $2 million was spent reinforcing dangerous areas and restricting access. But the Grand Canyon has 277 miles of rim. You cannot protect it all. News outlets picked up the story with headlines about the couple that died together. The detail that made this case memorable was a witness report that the couple had been holding hands when they fell. Several people mentioned seeing them side by side, touching when the rim collapsed. The image of 2 people falling together became a symbol of how quickly joy can turn to tragedy. If you want to see more cases like this, make sure to subscribe to get your weekly dose of prevention before you end up on the next list.